I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under roll call, we have one commissioner Best and one supervisor Morgan.
How you doing?
First thing we need to do is approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any amendments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. First of all, under business, we have public comment. We have a person signed up. Two of them.
Board President Soa and fellow commissioners, my name is Kyle Yancey. I've spoke to you before. I'm the chapter president here at CRW. We're here to communicate our perspective on the happenings of collective bargaining. We're aware that you probably had several executive sessions with updates from the management team, and we believe it is important for you to hear from the employees also. We have been bargaining for some time now with the district. It was slow going at first, but after some long sessions and hard work from both sides, we were able to come to agreements on almost every article of the contract. It isn't unexpected that the compensation and health insurance would be the most difficult portion of the contract to come to agreement on. We want you to know that we're very committed to finding a solution with the management team. We believe strongly that our remaining concerns are fair and prudent. We're seeking a compensation package that keeps us at pace with inflation. For our membership, that means that our families can purchase the same amount of milk, eggs, flour that we did last year. Secondly, we recently switched health insurance plans in an effort to save the district money. This change came after management and union committee looked at the options. At those committee meetings, there was discussions about adjusting our VITA levels, or our HRA VITA levels, to help compensate for the higher out-of-pocket costs that we were going to see with this new insurance. And further, it was our understanding that the premium share would likely not change with the savings. However, we were presented with an offer with no adjustment to our VITA and an adjustment to our premium share. We hope each of you understands that you can communicate with us if you have any questions. It does not run afoul of any law or rule, regardless of what you may have heard. We aren't interested in running the process. We simply think that all the information the members of this board can, with all the information, as members of this board can make informed decisions. We plan on returning next month if the contract remains at issue to keep these lines of communication open. We want to thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight.
Thanks. Any questions?
No, just thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming. Under action items, we have a local contract review board that we're convening at this site. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board acknowledge and accept staff's post-construction evaluation of the CM/GC contracting methodology used for the emergency power and electrical upgrades project CIP 09-5096 as required by ORS 279C.355.
Second.
You're up, Adam.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners. I wanted to keep this presentation fairly short, so that if there's any other discussion that you might have had specifically to the report that was produced as Exhibit A, we could do that. So now that the generator project has been completed, as you know, we're required under statute to perform an evaluation of the CMGC process that was selected as an alternative to competitive, normal competitive bidding. The process was selected through initial findings and justifications that the board used to approve the process back in 2011. And again, this presentation will discuss the findings of the after construction analysis. In that initial justification, the two main requirements were required by statute. That was one, that the project method, the CMGC method, would not encourage favoritism or discourage competition. And the other one was that there would likely be some sort of cost savings by utilizing this contracting process to the district. Cost savings when compared with normal competitive bidding. So today I'll be discussing a little bit the analysis that we did and evaluating the process, how it worked. As I presented last month, this is just kind of a repeat of the final costs for the project. As you can see, the overall total costs that we budgeted, $3.2 million. We were within that when we calculate all of the final project costs, including not just construction, not just the CMGC contract portion of this, but also looking at the overall project costs, including staff, overhead, other indirect costs. And then on the bottom here, again, you can see the GMP portion, the guaranteed maximum price that the CMGC contractor was awarded initially. We did come in under budget on that as well. So there were some cost savings measures that were realized through use of this contract method. In the report, the last couple of pages, and again, in response to the requirement in statute to describe and conclude some lessons learned. Really, the point of the analysis, one of the points is so that should the district desire to use the CMGC process in the future, we can look back on this project as an example and say, what were the lessons that we learned? What are some things that we can do going forward? So I summarized those in the report, the last couple of pages, and summarize them here as well. Just to hit the high points, a key point was early communication with the CMGC. Once they're selected, early in the process, again, early as possible. That's true for any project, but again, as we're assembling a team for a project like this, of this scope, of this type, it's critical that communication begins early and frequently, and that was accomplished in this project. Including an owner control contingency and guaranteed maximum price was very advantageous for the district. It enabled us to address items that came up during construction that in a traditional process, a traditional bid build project may have cost the district more because of a traditional contractor potentially pricing those things differently. So as we were allowed to utilize a contingency and working with the CMGC contractor, it enabled us to proceed without too much delay in construction. Negotiating the GMP after a complete design, if possible. If in this project we elected not to do that, we went forward on about a 95% design. We knew where we were headed with the project. It's allowed that you can proceed that way by agreeing to a guaranteed maximum price on a design that's not quite finished. But again, as a lesson learned, I think it would be most advantageous to do it once the design's complete. We proceeded to expedite schedule, and even though there were a few issues that came along because of that during construction, we were able to make it through those and get through those obstacles. But again, as a lesson learned, as a concluding point, proceeding on a complete design before we reach the GMP. Requiring proposers to show a distinct plan of work. Again, that kind of goes back to the request for proposals process. We did get kind of a mix of proposals of the 5 that we received. We did provide quite a bit of detail, as I described in our report, of what was required for the proposers to provide in the way of detail, schedules, kind of an understanding of the project. But again, that's a very key point that we would want to use in the future as well. Providing project oversight with some specific engineering expertise, whether that expertise is in-house or whether it's contracted out. In this case, we don't have any really electrical engineering expertise in-house, so we opted to farm out the engineering portion as an oversight role with Cundiff Engineering, and that was very beneficial to the project to have a contracted engineer who was the owner's eyes and ears from the design phase through construction to really make sure that the contractor was designing and building what the district truly needed in the way of the electrical upgrades to the plant. One suggestion, one thought was to provide training to staff on the CMGC method, and really that comes down to being that it's not a traditional contracting method. There are staff that could benefit from orientation or that type of training to make them more aware of the process. I will say personally, I had not much experience in the CMGC method. Learned a lot as I went along, and had some great support. But that's just one conclusion from the project. Just a couple others, and then I'll conclude. Going back to the request for proposals again, our conclusion was that providing really clear details, just great clarity in the how the proposals will be evaluated once they're given to the district. We did have quite a bit of information in the RFP explaining the evaluation process. We did get some feedback during the course of the evaluations of the proposals from the proposers themselves that kind of led to this conclusion that there could have been a little bit more, how we were actually going to evaluate. We did have a point system in the RFP, but a little more information talking about how the evaluations would occur, the initial scoring, and then going into an interview process, just really summarizing the process that was intended to be used for evaluating proposals. And then lastly,
If I could,
Sure.
I wasn't here for this process,
Mhm.
so how many proposers did you have?
we had 5 proposers.
Yeah. Good, thanks.
Yep. And I'll just follow up on it real quick. The way that we evaluated those proposals is we did an initial scoring based on the proposals alone, and those were based on a number of criteria. It was a 100-point scale. And from that, we reached a determination of basically the passing grade based on those 5, and 2 out of the 5 were selected as heads above the other 3. So those were pursued and then interviewed, personal face-to-face interviews with those 2 qualifiers. And then lastly, again, going back to the engineer consultant, if a district elects to hire outside engineering as support in the project, whatever it is, determining early on what their role is in actual design of the project would be another helpful benefit. And again, that's a lesson learned there. We did utilize kind of engineering quite a bit in the design process, probably a little more than we initially anticipated with this process. We intended initially to have the contractor perform 100% of the design as things moved along. And again, these are some of the conclusions I had in there. It was evident because of a few reasons, but some of it was industry related. where we had a contractor in the electrical industry that for these types of projects, it became apparent that their understanding of what it meant to be given the opportunity to design and construct a project was a little bit different in translation than what we expected. It's probably not a surprise, but again, it was, we felt we had specified pretty clearly in the RFP what the requirements were. And again, all this to say that we were able to work through any issues, any speed bumps that we hit. And I touched on a few of those major ones in the report during the design phase. But you know, one probably big issue was just time in and of itself, was schedule. You know, we had a design process that lagged probably 6 to 9 months beyond what it should have been. And of course, time is money, and you know, could there have been more cost savings in that if we had done it a different way, or if we had identified certain things early on, issues, possibly, you know, that's a possible conclusion. So, but again, the overall take is that the project, using this process, we did accomplish the 2 goals that I mentioned earlier, the statutory goals that certainly didn't diminish competition or provide preference. We did feel we received some very representative proposals from a good segment of the industry out there. And then we did realize some cost savings. So right now, I'll just stop and open it up to any questions that you might have specifically on the report itself, or questions.
Yes, I have a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
On page 11, under your preliminary finding number 7, the last 2 paragraphs, one of the questions you've answered about what the misperceptions were and how they came about. In the last sentence, you indicate that while we received quality equipment, but without the level of cost and technical comparison that was expected, do you feel that we still got a good bang for our buck on that end?
Absolutely.
Even though you didn't have something to compare to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and really that came down to, again, our engineering expertise is not in the electrical realm, but having kind of engineering alongside us to say, yeah, this is a great product. You know, you're going to get what you need from a safety standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a reliability and longevity standpoint. The issue there was really that on a few products, we felt that there could have been a little bit more information provided by the contractor in the way of comparing, you know, manufacturer A to B to C.
Okay. Just 2 other questions. One, would you use this contractor again if you had the opportunity on a large project?
I think we would.
And secondly, would you use this method of contracting again if it was appropriate?
Yes.
Thank you.
Larry, 2 quick things. One, and I think you have learned now that people in the trades don't speak engineering. I spent a fair amount of my life trying to bridge that gap between those two. I mean, you can sit at a table with them and you come to an absolute agreement that you both agree to what it is, but when they get out there, you're going, that's not what we said.
Right.
And I'm not sure how you ever fix that, but that is the reality of what happens. And so to my second thing is, so was the scope that Cundiff Engineering had, did they understand that the contractor maybe wasn't gonna do as much engineering, and so did we have to backfill a lot of that work that we thought we were gonna get from the contractor, or, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, we did utilize them more than we had anticipated. When they came into the project, you know, way back in 2010, when they did this study, we didn't have a contractor on board yet. When they did their estimates, which was an advantage, they did their estimates with a traditional design bid build in mind. That actually became a great comparison when we looked at this and this specific analysis at the end. But yeah, definitely used them during the design phase more than we anticipated. We did, I think, at least one amendment. Well, there was one specific amendment during the design phase where we asked for additional funds.
Yeah.
So that kind of could pick up where the contractor did.
So how would you see us, if we use this process in the future, making sure that we scope that engineering piece better so that there's a clear understanding of what that level of work is supposed to be? I mean, I'm sure you and Bob could probably figure that out.
Some of it, some of the challenge was coming from a water
Yeah.
background and sewer background, it's a
Totally
little different with electrical.
Yeah. Oh,
But
absolutely.
again, contractors, are by and large, I think, similar. I've had issues with contractors in past
Yeah.
projects that it's not just one discipline per se, but I think there was some industry mindset in this specific project where the way that the average contractor would go out and build a generator system was more of like a design-build approach,
Yeah.
right?
I'm sure
Hey,
it was.
CRW, you want a generator, we're gonna go put it in for you, and we're gonna give you the best bang for your buck,
Mhm.
and get it done as quickly as possible. And that's really where they came in
Sure.
from the get-go, was with those two as what they thought were our main criteria. Where we said, yeah, those were primary criteria, but we also had some other ones, like
Mhm.
safety, life, health, safety, reliability of the equipment. Those were equal, if not more,
Yeah,
of a
test and
priority.
documentation and all that other
Right.
stuff
Right.
that tradespeople aren't very good at.
Well,
Yeah.
the other thing too is that this was really two projects in one.
Yeah, it was.
And I think that, that needs to be said.
Yeah.
We started out initially having an evaluation of our physical plant, and there was a lot of safety issues that surfaced in Kimberley, and that was really a project in itself. And because it was kind of the precursor to how receptive is the existing infrastructure in the plant to accepting this new piece of equipment.
Right.
So essentially, what Condup did is essentially re-engineer
Well, then evaluate,
the
and land
whole-
use engineer,
the whole front end. And
Yeah.
what came out of that is, you had asked earlier about the delay.
yeah.
Well, we had a couple of options at that point. We could, because the National Electric Code changed as it related to flash protection and some of that stuff. And we said, do we build by the current code? Or do we build safety into the plant infrastructure? We chose the latter.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what that did is that then you had a contractor coming in, looking at this as a standard project. And a standard generator project was almost a kit.
Yeah.
You come in, they pre-cut all the wires, you go, and you bring it in. Well, there's a delta between those 2 points.
Yes, there is.
And so as you bring those two together, that's what Adam is really talking
Yeah,
about.
and I will say that with that, the code point, that's a very good point that Mr. Moore brings up, that it really was probably, 2012 NFPA was what we designed to for Arc Flash. We felt that the contractors, from what we were seeing in the industry, was probably a 10-year lag, 5 to 10-year lag in just the codes. What they were building to was past tense, and we were here, investing some funds into something we want to go, years in the future. So that definitely added some difficulty.
So this whole code thing is a real problem, just so you know, because just because the NFPA does NFPA 72, which is the National Electrical Code, doesn't mean that any state will ever adopt it completely, and Oregon does not.
Correct.
Right? So we have a whole nother set of things that says, we don't accept that, we don't accept that, we don't accept that. And then, another 2 or 3 code cycles go by, and everything changes again, and there's this thing, and you kind of go, well, is it right? I mean, who's right here? Is the state right? It's politics, guys. I mean, that's what I've seen, and manufacturers want more of this. Our code, my opinion, is that the National Electrical Code is no longer the minimum safety code required to make a micro installation. It has now become a code that is driven to grease the skids of manufacturers and special interests. And it's too bad, because everybody's paying for that. Yeah.
Any more? No more from me. Now, we have provisions for public comment on this. Seeing none, we will panel, we'll have a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye, those opposed say no.
Commissioner Humbertson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kalani?
Aye.
Commissioner Eno?
Aye.
Commissioner Sola?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
We'll now close the local contract review board meeting and go on to our agenda, which is consent.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
Can I make one comment to our Chief Financial Officer?
Yes.
I note that we came in for the fiscal year 6% ahead in revenues. I realize that's not your fault, but I think it's a good thing. But we came in roughly 5% under budget in expenditures, and I would congratulate you and all the staff for a job well done. Thank you.
What we're gonna do, have a big party?
Works for me. Saturday, I think the party is Saturday, as a matter of fact.
Even gave you a party shirt.
Party shirt.
Yeah, there it is.
That's obligatory dress.
Informational reports, Carol?
Good evening. We'll start with the accounts receivable aging. As of July 31st, we had a balance of $860,000 in the accounts receivable utility billing. The balance as of today is about $430,000, so we have been collecting money right along. We're at a point where it's difficult to compare this number with 2 months ago because we have switched the commercial accounts to the alternate months. So as we move forward through the year, we'll start having some better comparisons. But when I look at these numbers in the 31 and beyond, all those numbers to the right, we are balancing pretty well with what we were last year at this time. So we are still collecting the outstanding past due balances as well, and we've had pretty steady inflows of cash from the commercial accounts for this cycle. In our cash and investment position as of July 31st, we've got a total of $7.9 million. You will see that it's down just a little bit from June 30th, but July we paid a lot of bills. We paid a little over $800,000 in accounts payable. Some of that was final payments on the generator project, so we did have some CIP dollars that went out in July. Much of that is related to last fiscal year and will be recorded or has been recorded as such. But that's why the cash balance is down. Again, we used to have the real peaks and valleys in the cash balances, and with moving the commercial accounts to the alternate months, we're going to start seeing that smooth out and be a little bit more steady. So if we look at our revenue compared with prior years, this is revenue across all funds. One thing you might notice that we have some pretty significant CIP revenue. That's the check that came in from PGE on the cost sharing of the generator project. And our SDC revenue this year is a little bit higher than it was last year. The water revenue and the other general fund revenue is actually pretty close to what we've seen in the past. That being said, we still have another accrual of unrecorded revenue, so revenue earned through June 30th that has not yet been recorded, so that number is actually going to go up. And here's our comparison of expenditures, and again, you can see that the CIP expenditures, the purple column is quite a bit higher this year. That's mostly related to the emergency generator, and that one project in and of itself used a lot of CIP dollars, but because it was one project, we were also able to actually spend that much on the CIP in that short time period of 1 year. The other expenditures in the general fund, personnel services, materials and services are relatively flat level with the prior year. So here's the chart that actually shows the dollar differences, and looking at the difference in the water sales, that really, really surprised me. But again, it's because we don't have June activity for commercial recorded yet, so the 2013-14 number will bump up pretty significantly. And the accrual for the prior year is included in that number. And as you can see, our personnel services, pretty close, materials and services, pretty close. This is the time of the year when I talk to you a little bit about the line item detail and give you a little bit more specifics. I'm gonna just run over this really quickly. You do have the reports in your board packet. General fund revenue is above the forecast by about $558,000. And part of that is when we did the budget, we did not know what the wholesale rate was gonna be. And our wholesale rate that we charged to Sunrise was higher, so that's a portion of it. And the balance of it is based on the rate increase that we did. And if you look at personnel services, we're at 96.1% in personnel services. We have done the year-end accruals in that area. Salaries were a little bit over budget, and that's due primarily to not utilizing as much general fund labor for CIP and moving it out of the general fund. Benefits and taxes are quite a bit lower, and that's due to the legislative change in our PERS rate that we had to pay this year. So we have an unspent balance of about $159,000. Materials and services, we're at about 96%. If you look at the different line items, we're anywhere from, in some of them, we're anywhere from 2% to 125% greater than what we budgeted on those specific line items. But then if you look at the categories within our budget, and they're summarized in the report in your packet, none of those categories exceeded 100% of the budget. And of course, within our appropriation, materials and services were fine. And our capital outlay came in at 77.7%, so we still had about $50,000 left that we hadn't spent. And then I just thought I'd throw in a little graph here to show, the red line shows the actual costs that we have recorded in all of the funds, and the blue columns are the budget amounts for each of the funds. And so we are within budget in every fund. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Have none, thank you for your report. Go on now to the manager's report.
First, I'd like to start off my report
Thanks, Carol.
really congratulating both Adam and Mr. Bob George for the work they've done on our capital improvement projects. They've had a pretty full plate over the last year, and they've done a great job in bringing those projects in on time and below budget. As you heard from Adam, they really took on this CMGC contracting approach, new experience for them, and I've seen a lot of examples of CMGC contracting, and when I was looking at and read through Adam's report at the conclusion of the project, it's probably the best I've seen. They've done a great job, and so I wanted to thank them in front of the board here, because I think they deserve it. The other item that I'd like to call your attention to, and I think this was in response to a couple of your requests. As you look at the management report from now on, what we're doing is, you had asked me to identify when I was working on goal activity versus just general activity in the management report. So as you look down, for example, on number 3 in the report, you'll see an asterisk. That's to let you know that that's a goal item, so you can kind of keep track of what we're doing on a monthly basis as it relates to the general manager organizational goals. And so I just wanted to call your attention to that.
Thank you.
The first thing I have to report on is some of our legal activity. As you know, we had some concerns in the Mitchell elections case. The judge has ruled on that. The judge has indicated that CRW is entitled to recover costs, court costs, and attorney costs to the tune of about $54,900. And
that happened. The judge said he would rule within a short period of time. He did. I think it was 2.5 weeks after the case was called. I didn't have time to put it in my report, but I do want to advise that the records case that we had appealed, the Court of Appeals had denied that request, but they did reduce the attorney fees that we were being requested to pay by about $2,000. And we'll talk more about the status of these court cases in executive session. We also had the federal case, which was case filed by ex-Commissioner Holloway, is being handled by SDAO and their attorney Brett Mesereau. I think Commissioner Kalani sat through most of that hearing.
All of it.
All of it, okay. Okay. And the judge has indicated that he would rule on that shortly. I suspect that that'll be within 30 days or so. The other activity that we've been involved in is, this is one with the asterisks, is our meetings with the CRWC, that's commission meeting. We've had that. For those of you who did not attend, the commission decided to retain the current officers. As you know, the president is Commissioner Humbertson. The vice chair is Ron Blake from Sunrise Water Authority. Commissioner Kalani is the secretary, and Deanna Weiss is the treasurer. So we've said because of the time in office was so short, it didn't make a lot of sense to switch that over. What the board did do, the commission board did do, is instruct the general managers to make sure that as we begin to proceed with trying to identify savings within the organizations, that we identify what those items are, that we track those items in terms of timelines, and that we also report on salary savings or dollar savings as they come about. And so I am working with Sunrise General Manager, Mr. Hathorn, to figure out a format and a process for putting that together so that information will be available to all. And we're also looking at the possibility of maybe trying to do something with our websites. We're not quite sure how we're going to do that. Staff, the CRW staff did meet again with the city of Milwaukee to talk about our IGA with them. We talked about a lot of stuff and I made a listing of the things that we exchanged that we're working on. We're looking at the GIS system so we can study the hydraulics within the districts to see where it made sense for us to continue service or not. Our CFO met with their CFO, and we're talking about some kind of billing configuration between the two entities so that the customers are getting one bill rather than multiple bills, and they're going to be reporting back on that. They also asked if we could help them with hydraulic modeling. They've lost some staff over there, and so we're working on that issue with our engineering department. And then they also look at the vehicle repair activity. We take all of our large equipment over there for servicing. They'd like that one to be a standalone MOU. We do it currently, so this would be a revision to that. And the other item that we talked about is there's an issue with, which is similar to what we were dealing with Oregon City, is the idea that whenever we're doing work within the city limits there, the issue is permitting, and what traditionally would happen is we put a deposit down, we do the work, and then we get the deposit back. So one of the things that we've talked about, and I think we're doing it now, I'm not sure, where we just give them the deposit and they hold on to it, and we do it on an annual basis, so.
Like a retainer.
Yeah, so it just.
We're not
seems-
trading checks.
Yeah, it's just crazy, so we're working on that, and Carol's working with their finance people on that, but they don't seem to be opposed or adverse to that. And then the other thing we're gonna be looking at is commercial meter reading, to see whether or not, I think we're all paying the same people to look at the meter twice. And so we said, well, you know, the meter reader's not letting us know about this, of course, so that may be a way for us to save somebody there.
Smart.
So, the other thing is, we've also had a meeting with Sunrise. They don't have a structured purchasing system. We do, and so we have been talking about sharing our resource with them. So our buyer and contracts people met with them, and we have run through a couple of trial transactions to see how it works. We've also provided them with copies of our LCRB rules, and I think they're going to be presenting those to their board for adoption, maybe with some modifications, I'm not sure.
Yeah, good question. With that, would you anticipate some cost savings between the two districts as a result of that discussion, potentially?
Well, primarily on their part, in the sense that they're not having to go through and pay for an attorney and everything else to review or implement and LCRB rules there.
The previous part of that discussion, if you reiterate that, that was the part I was focused on. And you went into the point right before that, something that they don't have available
Oh,
to
they
them.
don't have LCRB, they have not adopted LCRB rules. They do,
There was an item right before that.
I think
Maybe
what
Carol
you're
would.
talking about is they don't have a person to handle the procurement.
That was
And
it.
so the CRW person will be doing dual duty, both Sunrise and CRW. His cost for doing activity for Sunrise will be billable through the commission.
Okay.
And so we'll end up, we're still paying the full salary here, but we'll have a little offsetting revenue.
Okay. That's the point I was getting.
well, and that's really the driver in the 190 arrangement, is Wade is very sensitive to not wanting to add staff unless he has to, and especially where there's an opportunity where they can share a resource with CRW, and so.
Just one point, and so we have excess capacity to do that work?
Yes.
I don't know, yeah.
Well, it's not excess.
Well,
Well, one of the things that we're doing is looking at each of our functions and said, if we were to organize differently, is there a way for us to be able to handle additional work from one or the other, depending on what the item is?
but that's what you run into with smaller entities,
Mhm.
is you always have to have one, right? You're stuck with one, and maybe there isn't always enough for one to do, but you still gotta have one. And so it's nice when you can load that employee, to a higher level to.
Well, I'll pick on our friend Ms. Campbell here, she's, not
Oh.
only does the HR,
Mhm.
but she's also doing board support,
Right.
et cetera. And so, one of the things we're talking about, Sunrise has a person who does board support. They also, because they're the administrative agency, they do board support for the commission. So maybe if what we do is we take the board support activity that Adora does and have one person handle all three.
Yeah.
Likewise, they don't have a human resources function, they contract out for that.
Oh.
So maybe what we can do is broaden Adora's responsibilities to do the human resources for both organizations. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at, and so, and it should be a win and fair.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've done, another asterisk, is the Portland Water Bureau intertime meeting. We had a meeting with them, we being Sunrise Water Authority. Wade and Tim Jansen and myself met with the engineering staff of City of Portland. There is a report, I think I put it in the board packet, showing what some of those scenarios would cost, and I think they range from, I think there was a low of 12 to a high of $35 million. One of the things that we talked about, or at least I walked away from the meeting thinking about, this may be an area where we might want to approach our congressional delegation and try to find some federal money that, given the cost associated with this, because we really do need a east side backbone, you know, over here, like they've been working on the west side, and it would benefit all. And so that's an area for us, I think, to look further. And the other thing is that the CRWP managers, we also met with Lake Oswego to look at an intertie in that area. There's some complications with that, and so we've kind of lowered the horizon on our expectations. A couple of things that we're concerned about, and I can really say I'm concerned about, is that there were some commitments made by Lake Oswego to the citizens of West Lynn that when they build out the new pump station, I guess, water treatment
Yeah, it
plant,
is a water treatment plant.
yeah, that they would abandon certain infrastructure. What would happen if we decided to take over that infrastructure? It could potentially put us in the middle of some commitments made that I'm not sure we want to be involved in. And so we've kind of, and some of the costs that they've advanced thus far seem to be pretty cost prohibitive. And so we're still working on the issue, but we're really looking at two approaches, you know, and so far this one looks like the one with Portland seems to make better sense, so particularly for CRW.
I think, given the politics in Portland with the bastard child east side people, you know, wanting some equality compared to the west side of the community, I think your timing for that kind of, you know, help or look from a congressional meeting, I think would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you saw today, we're involved in labor negotiations, and we will continue talking with staff. We're not at an impasse, and as we make progress, we will obviously continue to talk to the board about it. The other thing that we had is we have identified or purchased iPads for those commissioners who have expressed a desire to switch over. I think Commissioner Humberson has switched over. I don't know if Commissioner Kalani or
Not yet.
or Chairman Sola have. I know David said you wanted to stay the course.
Yeah,
Okay. So, so any of you that want to switch over, let us know, and come has the devices so she can get you switched over. Okay, you got a customer. I don't know if you care, Larry, one way or the other, and yours.
You're trying to make computers more complicated?
No, we want to make you work.
I'm finding it very helpful.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not tied to my desk when I want to do work on it, and they tied it via Wi-Fi to the printer. So
Mhm.
when I need to print out documents and things, I don't have to be in the room hooked up with a wire. I can just push the button and it sends it to it, and it prints out the document that I need. So I'm finding it very useful. I'm still learning how to use it, but so far, it's an interesting device. Put it that way.
Hope you don't lose that Mac address.
Yeah, you got that right.
A couple more items, and then I'll be done. We have a customer out on Little Road where, for the last couple of years, we've been trying to work with him on a water quality issue. And we're now at a point where we are going to be putting a filtration system basically on the line to his house, so that we can try to determine whether or not the problem is ours or his. We think the problem is his, but we're at a point where we kind of need to prove it. And so this is really what's going to, I think, help resolve that problem. It'll probably take us about 8 or 9 months to get some data so we can make that determination. So it's really more of a customer service issue, I think, than anything else at this point. Emergency management training, as you know, we've sent Mr. Bunyard off. We are going to have, he won't be here for September, but we will have the IAP drafts that we will be presenting to the board. We're looking at about 3 different scenarios, and we've created IAPs for each of those scenarios. So that'll be forthcoming to the board.
Good, thanks.
We'll do that. We had Commissioner Savas from Clackamas County make a request for us. You saw that under attachment 3 in your binder. We provided him with that information, but because it was an elected official request, we thought you as a board should know about it. And so, I'm not sure what he's going to do with it, so, but he has it. Yes.
He's the commissioner that's assigned to the Economic Development Commission, so it may be related to that.
Yeah, and there's a copy of his request and what we provided in your board packet under tab 3. The last item that I have is that we have the open house coming up on Saturday. I was kind of kidding you a little bit earlier about the t-shirts, but we wanted you to be one of us, and so we basically have the same shirt for each of you. So in the event that there are ratepayers and stuff like that, they'll know that you are approachable and you can do your grip and grin.
The blower covered.
And if you're hungry, there will be food provided as well. So that is the end of my report, unless you have any questions.
I guess not. Thank you. We again have opportunity for public comment. Anybody from the public? And now we're going to commission business. I'd like to start off the business by welcoming Commissioner Wise from the Sunbright Water Authority. We appreciate you coming to our board. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kalani indicated that he may have a scheduling conflict for the October meeting, I believe it was. Is that correct, Hugh?
That's it.
He is going to have to be out of town, but I believe it works if we could move the meeting to the 8th instead of the 9th, which would be simply the day before.
Right, the day before would work.
If staff can work with that, then I know my schedule is clear for that. If your schedule will be clear. For the October meeting, we would go on at the same time, same place, but on the 8th instead of the 9th. Make sure you mark your calendars for October 8th. And that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I remind you, all the commissioners, to get your expense reports in on a timely basis. With that, we'll adjourn the regular meeting and go into executive session.